All right, and so the announcements I have are a couple. One, not this week, but next week will be our last paradigm of the summer, and that's for a few reasons. One, is summer school over next week? Is it coming to a close pretty quickly? Yeah, and so that's how we've always done our rhythm. And this year, I would have liked actually to done paradigm a few more weeks, but we partner with a local ministry here in town that is in charge of receiving all of the international students that come to the University of New Mexico. We have a partnership with the campus, a partnership with this ministry, and we have allowed this building to be used for the last, I think, maybe 15, maybe more years to be their welcome center, the place where all the international students come. They get hooked up with apartments, cell phones, bank accounts, all the kind of basics they're going to need. They get hooked up with friends, with food, with the campus, their schedules, all of that. It's a wonderful ministry. And so they're actually starting that next week. And so the building will be filled with people and with protocol and with sanitizing and social distancing and all of that. And so because of that, not this week, but next week is our final paradigm. I wanted to make sure that people online got to hear that. The second thing I want to say is tomorrow night is what's called our leadership training conference or a ministry team training conference. And we normally do this in the spring up in the mountains with a bunch of other college students. And we hang out and have a great time. But obviously, I'm tired of saying COVID, but we all know that didn't happen. And so what we're going to do this year is we're inviting literally all of you, unless you're an incoming freshman. If you're an incoming freshman, we just ask you to enjoy the ministry for the first year. Let us pour into you. Let us get to know you. We don't want anything from you necessarily, except for you to be here, to make friends, to have fun, to grow in your walk with Jesus, to be encouraged and to be challenged. But if you're a sophomore on, and if you're in discipleship or interested in it, and if you're a part of a local church, that's the imperative part, because we exist. This ministry exists entirely for the health and the sake of the local church. And so we want you to be serving and growing in that capacity. But honestly, this ministry gives you a lot of chances to grow in your ability to serve that a lot of your churches don't give you yet, just because you're kind of out of youth group and kind of not an adult yet, and you're kind of figuring it out. And we say, let's not waste that time. This is actually a really important time in your life. And so we want to develop you during that time. And so tomorrow night at 6:30, we are going to start this year's LTC. And if you come, and if you meet those requirements, we want you to be on our ministry team. And this is why this is going to be a very unique year. We're not going to be able to do a lot of things that we normally do and how we normally do them. And we need college students to tell us as a staff what you guys need, how we can serve you this year. How can we push you towards the gospel and the glory of God and discipleship and sharing your faith in this new season? What things can we do if we're not able, if we can't meet like we normally do? What are other things and ideas and ways we can push people to worship, share their faith, disciple, feel welcomed and loved, and all the different things our ministry teams do? And so we really need you. We as a staff are dependent on you. And so we have about 30 RSVPs for that already, that's just A-okay, right? And so we would love for more. We'd love to fill up this room as much as we can. So the fun thing about tomorrow, and if you're like, I don't know, I don't know if I want to do that, that's great. We have so much grace this year. We know it's a weird and a strange year. And so we are okay with you saying on Friday night, I don't know if I want to do that. I don't know if I can do that. Come, let us give you a little bit more information. Let us talk about how the last year was. At the end of that, the staff has planned a gigantic scavenger hunt on campus with a trophy and some gift cards for the winning team. So that'll go into the evening and it'll be at night. And so don't sprain your ankle or whatever. If so, we didn't plan this hunt. I don't know. So it's going to end with something fun. And if you decide, I don't think committing to that is something that I feel comfortable doing this next year, that's great. Don't come back Saturday morning. Okay. So Saturday morning from 9 to 2, we're going to meet again. And that'll be more of our planning day, the day that we really look forward to this next semester and pray and ask God to give us wisdom and to give us faithfulness to continue to be Lobos who are also lights, right? Lobos who go out on campus and live for something more, live for something bigger than themselves, bigger than this world. That's actually kind of how we're going to close this evening. Is correct worship, right worship. We want the world to see that, and it's going to contrast. And so it's important. It's important that you guys do that in this season. And so please be a part of that. If you know somebody who's not here, I've said this every week, but it's happening tomorrow night. So now I'm like giving the long spiel again. That should be here. Let them know. And if they say, man, I can't make it, I work or I have a wedding or we're going out of town or I just traveled, so I have to quarantine or whatever, let them know that's fine. Just get in touch with the staff member. They still want you to be on ministry team. It's a very different year, and we want to accommodate as much as we can because we know a lot of you are having a bunch of crazy situations, and we understand that. We're sorry about that. And we want to make sure that ministry to you and through you still happens this year. And so that's my spiel. That's my last announcement. And so that is tomorrow night at 6:30 here. We're not feeding you tomorrow night. And so come having eaten, but we'll have lots of snacks. We'll have things that you don't have to share. There's no popcorn bowls or anything like that, but we'll figure that out. And on Saturday, we'll give you lunch. So we'll have food. We'll have food here. We'll serve it. We're learning all the guidelines, this and that, blah, blah. But again, we ask you to continue to social distance and everything you can do on this property. Like I said, I don't control your lives. I'm not your dad or your mom. As soon as you leave my parking lot, go crazy, touch each other's faces, right? And so, well, no, but do whatever you're gonna do. But let's when we're here, let's keep this place pretty kosher and clean so that we can hopefully this semester meet as often as possible and that door doesn't get shut. That's my whole heart in trying to keep you guys 6 feet apart in this building, is that this building doesn't become kind of a sore spot and we get shut down. And so all that being said, let's move on to our last week on sin. Oh, praise God. We have been talking, if you're just here tonight, we have been talking about sin for the whole summer, and that's important. We talked about how I wanted to kind of change what I was teaching in the Word, and that's kind of what's good about expository preaching, which is just picking a book of the Bible and going through it. The pastors don't just get to pick and choose what they want to say, right? Like it holds us accountable, and I'm not a pastor, teacher of the Word. It holds us accountable to what God's Word says, to what His counsel is. You know, like if I wanted to, I could just focus on missions passages and evangelism passages, things that kind of work around our DNA. But the reality is, without an understanding of sin, worship never happens, and evangelism has no power, right? If you don't understand why the person you're talking to needs saved, then you're probably not saved, right? You probably don't know Jesus. And the reason we need saved is because of sin. And so we have, I mean, for a long time, at the beginning of the semester, we started talking about Adam and Eve and their original sin, right? And then we moved through this summer, we've talked about Cain and Abel, rapid nature of sin. It's not something that society creates or grows. It's something that's in us. Cain killed his brother, first generation murder and hate, right? After that, society started growing the results of sin, where people started killing each other, started bragging about their sin, their thoughts weren't even considering God. Right? They had moved so far away from him that he had regard for them, but they had no regard for him. And so out of his wisdom and sovereignty and love, he destroyed the world and everyone on it, except for one family, Noah, who walked with God. We talked about it. All through this is sprinkled these examples of people who know God and love God and trust God, and God is faithful and good, and he honors that, and he saves them. Right. And so we are now after the flood, right? He wiped out all the people, all of the societies, so we can start again, right? Because sin doesn't exist in people. It's how we're trained. It's what people do. It's society that forms these sins. That's the common argument, right? That everybody's good, but America, capitalism, Democrats, Republicans, whatever you love or hate, right? That group made people bad. And so that's why we need to vote for the other group, so that group can make people good. It's just that's common understanding in our world today. And so in the scriptures, we see that society was wiped out. First family that walked off, a terrible sin happened. We talked about that last week. Just right away, something happened inappropriate between a son and his parents in some way. Noah got drunk and allowed that to happen, and it all started again, right? Sin is going to just be the kind of the symbol throughout the Old Testament. I don't want to say the drum beat, because I think God's grace and the gospel is the drum beat, right? But that's where we are this evening. Okay, so we're in the aftermath of the flood. The ground is now dry. It's not just Noah's family. We're going to read a whole new genealogy, and we are going to close on another scene. There's these scenes. Cain and Abel was a scene, the flood was a scene, and now the Tower of Babel is a scene that this writer is wanting us to look at and examine so that we can better understand sin and its effects, sin and its ways, right? Sin and its resiliency. That's what we're talking about now. Sin is resilient. It hung on in Noah's family, and it's going to grow and continue to corrupt this new generation, this new group of people. So let's actually read it. Again, I only took one semester of Hebrew in my master's, okay? So I can't say these names. And so you can laugh, we can all snicker. I read it to my daughter and she's like, Dad, that sounds hard. I was like, yeah, it's hard. So I've read it a lot, just so you know. I didn't just like pick it up and not try, but these are weird names. So again, here's the next genealogy. So we had Seth's genealogy leading to Noah. Now we're having a new genealogy given to us. And this is where it is in Genesis chapter 10. We're going to read all of Genesis chapter 10 right now. These are the generations of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Sons were born to them after the flood. The sons of Japheth were Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshech, and Tyrus. The sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz, Ripath, and Togarmah. The sons of Javan, Elisha, Tarshish, Kittim, and Dodanim. I know some of you are like, I could read this easily. You can't. For these, the coastland people spread in their lands, each with his own language, but the clans in their nations. The sons of Ham, Cush, Egypt, Put, and Canaan. The sons of Cush, Sheba, Havlah, Sabta, Ramah, Sabteka. The sons of Ramah, Sheba, and Dedan. Cush fathered Nimrod. He was the first on earth to be a mighty man. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore it is said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. The beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh, in the land of Shinar. From that land he went into Assyria and built Nineveh, Rehoboth, Calah, and Lebhabim, Naphtim, Pathrusim, Kaluhim, from whom the Philistines came, and Caphtorim. Canaan fathered Sidon, his firstborn, and Heth, and the Jebusites, the Amorites, the Girgashites, the Hivites, the Arkites, the Sinites, the Arvadites, the Zemarites, and the Hamathites. Afterward, the clans of the Canaanites dispersed, and the territory of the Canaanites extended from Sidon in the direction of Gerar as far as Gaza, and in the direction of Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, and Zeboim as far as Lasha. These are the sons of Ham by their clans, their languages, their lands, and their nations. To Shem also, the father of all the children of Eber, the elder brother of Japheth, children were born. The sons of Shem, Elam, Asher, Arpachshad, Lud, and Aram. The sons of Aram, Uz, Hol, Gether, and Mash. Arpachshad fathered Shelah, and Shelah fathered Eber. To Eber were born two sons. The name of the one was Peleg, for his days on the earth was divided, and his brother's name was Joktan. Joktan fathered Almodad, Shileth, Hazaravamath, Jerah, Hadoram, Uzal, Diklah, Obal, Abimael, Sheba, Ophir, Havlah, and Jobab. All these were the sons of Joktan. The territory in which they lived extended from Mesha in the direction of Sephar to the hill country of the east. These are the sons of Shem by their clans, their languages, their lands, and their nations. These are the clans of the sons of Noah, according to their genealogies in their nations, and from these the nations spread abroad on the earth after the flood. Okay, and so we're heading to Babel. Babel's next, and it's only about 9 verses, and so we can spend a little bit of time here and just kind of think, like, what's here? What is the writer doing? Can anyone say their great-great-grandfather's name? Don't make it up, Micah. Micah's like Japheth, Elbakar, something crazy. Can you? Your great-great-grandfather? Okay. What is it? Jim. Well, that's pretty easy. That's Oklahoma for you. So, anyone else? There we go. Okay, there's a few. That's pretty impressive, right? And so for us to have a few people in here that can say their great-great-grandfather, this is a little different, right? So why do you think these writers did this? Why do you think? Because these are the parts where we just glaze over, right? We just kind of go shibber shab, blah, 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 blah. Okay, Babel, right? And we get down to Babel, and we jump in and we start going from there. Why do you think this is here? Yeah, that's right. Okay, and so just like in the other genealogies that we talked about, the writer has a purpose to show something, right? And so first it was to see how the earth was filling with people. The next genealogy we read was, and he died, 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 was to show the results of sin, right? Like this crazy lineage of people that were just dying, but he takes that language out again, right? So the goal here again is not to show this kind of building sin nature, but the goal is to show the blessing of God. And there's something crazy. There's actually 70 names mentioned here. And so it's hard because we want, as historians and as super logical people, like we want it to be like every person that was there, just say their name and we'll record it, we'll put it in a database and we'll have the names. That's not how Israelites really recorded history, right? And so that number 70 was important. What do you think the reason for 70 is? Anyone know? 7, 70, all these different, it just means complete, right? And so he chose certain people, and some of these aren't people, some of them are nations, right? If you read through it, it's kind of confusing, but his goal was to just kind of say, I'm just commenting on the complete world, right? Like everything that was out there that we knew, that we understood, that we had. But who was writing this? Moses, right? And so now we have to be like, oh yeah, okay, this is not Noah recording this, right? This is not people in the day of the flood right after recording this. This is Moses. Where's Moses at? Well, he's either in the desert with the people right now or on the edge of the promised land, right? So maybe they're just about to get into the promised land and he's kind of finishing up this writing. It's kind of that 40 years, because remember, Moses didn't get to go into the promised land because of his sin. And so Moses is writing as the people are being judged for their faithlessness. This is going way back to Genesis when we first started, right? To this audience of people who understand everything he's saying, right? All these names, they're like, oh yeah, him, oh that's my great grandfather, right? Like, so he's not writing just to record history, right? Like he's writing to kind of say, like, remember that this complete nation. This is, and where does the arrow point? Do you guys know who is the last lineage? Who is the last son that it talked about? Shem, right? And who's in the line of Shem? Jesus. You're just gonna go for it all the way to the cross, right? Yeah, that's right? And so Jesus is in the line of Shem, right? And you'll actually read that in the New Testament, right? And so going back a little bit, it's Abraham. Right. And so you have Noah to Shem to Abraham. And now the people in the desert are going, oh, I get it. So he's actually connecting them in these 11 chapters all the way back to the first person ever created. But more importantly, right, he's connecting them to Abraham, right, who he's about to start talking about right after this story of the Tower of Babel. Okay, so some of you might have read this in your Bible reading before and been really confused by it, because up top, we get these nations, and it talks about their languages, and it talks about their cities, and it talks about their, like how they're spread out and this and that. And then it goes to Babel where everyone has one language, right? And it's good to do study like this, because when you read stuff like that, you go, maybe the Bible's not real. No, it's real. It's real. Okay, just believe. Okay, keep reading, right? You don't have to do that. Okay, and when you come to something like this and you say, well, just above, it said all this stuff, but now it's saying this stuff, I suggest you slam on your brakes and start asking good questions, right? And so what's happening is the writer is setting up Babel, because from Babel is going to come the line of Shem, and from that, out of is going to come Abraham, right? And so he basically, almost like the audience was hearing this story, it's almost like when you're watching a movie and it just finally breaks and it shows all of the back information that you've been wanting, like the dad is being super sweet to the daughter, and then the daughter is like dressed in black as an old lady or a young woman at her dad's funeral, and you're like, oh, she's got daddy issues. That makes sense. I get it now, right? Like that's kind of what he's doing. He's connecting all these wandering people in the desert to why this stuff matters. And they say, oh, Abraham, from Abraham came Israel, right? Like, and then Joseph, like, oh yeah, that's part of our story. We're kind of connecting it. We remember that we were like slaves for 400 years, and Joseph was the guy who did that. And the guy who did that before him was that like Jacob and Abraham and Isaac and all. Oh, so he's giving them all this fill information that kind of helps them go, oh, this is how we got here. This is why we're here right now, right? And so he's catching them up, and then he goes back again to the ancient world after the flood. Okay, so I know that was boring and not very important to some of you, but the point of this is twofold, right? This shows us God blessing his people, right? God is allowing them to multiply and grow and fill the earth, like he said. And it also connects these people, right, to the Israelites who are about to go into the promised land that God had said that they would have. Okay, and so that's important. Okay, it's important to understand, one, because we're about to read how there's just one language, and some of you would have been, I know the next question would be like, I thought above it said that there was lots of languages and there's a couple of different cultures. And the answer is you're right, right? And so Noah cast a big brush, and then he brought us back to after the flood to give us the last kind of little insight into sin in this early time of the earth. And that's the last part, is the Tower of Babel. Sin is resilient. And so let's get there. Let's read it. I'm going to split it up into two parts so we can kind of look at it in a few sections. And so let's read 1 through, I think it's 4. It says, now the whole earth, so we're going back to the flood, kind of back to after the flood. The whole earth had one language and the same words. This is after the sons had begun to reproduce. And as the people migrated from the east, again going to the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. And they said to one another, come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone and bitumen for mortar. Then they said, come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth. Okay, so what's happening? I didn't let any of you ask about Nimrod. I don't really know what Nimrod was or did. No one really knows. And so if the Nimrod fans out there, if you're wondering, I don't have the answer, so don't come afterwards. It's kind of I don't know if that was his name, I don't know if that was his title. There's kind of some of these things that the hearers would have been like, Nimrod, and like thousands of years have lost that for us, right? So we don't know Nimrod. We don't really know exactly what he was doing. And even the map is a little vague, like they came from over the sea, and so you kind of have to put it together. But we do know that in the Israelites' mind, we talked about it, the earth was flat, right? And it only extended to the ocean. In the ocean was chaos, right? And so they are really considering what they could see and what they knew. That doesn't mean that the whole, like, again, I'm not getting into this, that the flood wasn't the whole earth, but we're talking mainly about, like, if you read it, all of those people are people that the Israelites have encountered in their history or will encounter as they go to take the land, right? So the Canaanites, the Perizzites, Girgarites, Malachites, all those people, they're about to start experiencing them. I forgot to mention that. So Abraham or Moses fills them in on these nations because it matters. Like, it is a part of their world as they understand it and know it. And so here, what's going on at this tower? What's happening?
I feel like it's kind of like the opposite of be fruitful and multiply, because they're like,
yeah, it's interesting. I've read this story so many times and heard it used in so many different ways to kind of say what was going wrong at the Tower of Babel. And I'm going to present a new idea tonight. I'm not going to shoot that down completely, right? But the reality is that was a blessing. Right? God blessed them and said, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. You can't really disobey a blessing, right? You can disobey a command, right? But God blessed them and told them to do that. And the reality was, it was kind of happening. Like, they're heading east and yeah, they want to be dispersed. They want to be together, but I kind of want to be with my family. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want something to happen that makes us have to split up. And so that was something I believed for a long time. And I'm not saying it's necessarily wrong, but I don't think that's the core. I don't think that's the centerpiece of the disobedience. And so what else? I mean, I just made you nervous because you're going to give me your idea, and I'm probably going to shoot it down because I have like a trick answer, and that actually might be true tonight. But yeah.
I've always heard it said it was kind of like they were trying to attain divinity by reaching heaven with their 5-year-old.
Yeah, you were circling it. I've heard that too, ish. Like I don't think no one in the ancient world believed that they could like build a stairway to heaven, right? But there was a significant spiritual purpose, right? So one of the other reasons I've heard, Micah, you got a hand up?
I mean, along with that, trying to get closer to God physically.
Yeah, this idea that if we can get closer to God, or actually, it's called a ziggurat is the name, if you guys want to write that down. I wouldn't if I were you. But the idea was not so they could go up. The idea was that God could come down. And so the other, just to give the kind of the full spectrum of good kind of beliefs on this passage, some people believe that, God wanted them to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth as kind of a nations verse and passage. And I think that we're going to talk about how this affects the nations. And they were disobeying that, so he condemned them. We talked about that a little bit. Or the other one is that they were prideful, right?
That's actually what I was gonna
Yeah.
talk about, because in verse 4, they say at one point, let us make a name for ourselves.
Yeah.
It isn't a humble statement.
No,
to say, but-
it's not. I mean, that's why I do this job, right? Like, I hope that you guys will talk about me for years and years and years. No. Yeah. And so that's the other. Yeah, right. That's the other common belief, because it says, let us. And, let's make a name for ourselves. But it's interesting, because if you read just below this, when God calls Abraham out, he says, I'm going to make your name great, Abraham. Right? So there probably was pride here, maybe a little bit, right? There is this idea that they're trying to build something grand and great to make a name for themselves. But I really don't think that's the core issue. I don't think that's the core sin that's happening here, because again, God's about to promise Abraham a name, and that makes Abraham go, okay, I'll walk out into the desert, right? Like, if you're gonna make my family huge, and if you're gonna make a name for me and bless the world, it's like I can't imagine that Abraham wasn't like, all right, let's do this. It's my time, And so I'm with you, and I believed that as well at some times. Anyone else see anything different? I mean, we're circling it here, Katarina.
Very similarly to this is part of their pride, but kind of they don't feel like they need God.
Yeah, it's a good thought.
The Bible has a few notes in some verses, 11 to 4 being one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Which basically says, before you start building something in your life, make sure it's correct.
Got it. Yeah. And so so Katarina said this idea of not needing God, building good things in your life, right things in your life, understanding God. Yeah, that's good. Any other thoughts?
Isn't it like they're just trying to do what only Christ can do? They're trying to fix the separation that they have with God by themselves.
Yeah. So they're trying to do what only, I'd say in this context, God can do, Christ will do. Only Christ can do. Absolutely. But yes, the answer to that is absolutely yes. Yeah. They're trying to build a connection with something, with God. And that's something we can never do, right? That's a great observation. And so any other thoughts? Danny, you got a concerned face? No, just listen and enjoy it. It's weird. We haven't had that many people over here. So shout out to you guys. Way to be over there. Yeah. I heard 3 words. Proud of you. Hate masks, man. This was so much more fun back in the day. Yeah, I think something a bit more significant is happening. And so we're going to get a little nerdy, in ancient digs of Mesopotamia at this time. We've talked about the ancient Near East a lot. Something significant was happening around the time when bricks were being made. Okay, so they moved to a plain. They can't cut out rocks and move them into the middle of this. That's too labor intensive. It's almost impossible. They're developing this new technology. And around this time, all throughout, there's tons of digs they're called ziggurats, right? And the mindset was that there would be a temple, a granary, and a ziggurat, right? And it's kind of the first urbanization of the world. Okay, so this wasn't like the hipsters going in and making coffee shops and electric scooters in town and living in the weird apartments that used to be a school. This isn't how that was going. Actually, everybody still lived out, but they came together, right? And they came together around these places of worship. Okay, and so these places is where small markets would be, granaries would be, where you bring your grain to get kind of milled. That's where the temple would be, and that's where these ziggurats would be. Let me make sure I'm saying that right. I feel like I am. I know I am. I studied a lot. I promise. And so what was happening all throughout the ancient Near East right now is everybody is building these stairways. Okay, and at the top of these stairways was a bed. And so this was not a place where people would go and worship. This was not like a pilgrimage place. That was the temple. But this was a place where the people of the area, to the God of the area, would build a stairway, and at the top of it, they would give him a place to refresh him or her as they make their pilgrimage down to earth. Okay, and so there's this idea that we should make it easier for God to come, because if we do, then he'll come down and hear us. He'll bless us. He'll go back up in heaven and make the rain come, or make the nations afraid of who we are, make us great and mighty. So this is happening all over the place. There's tons of them. There's hundreds of this time, these ziggurats, right? And so God is seeing all of these people urbanizing around these ziggurats, right? These places that once one of those was built, a temple would be built, a granary would be built, and kind of this urban center would happen. And then these societies were growing, and so coming. So God sees this early on happening, and he responds. Okay, let me see if I had another thought on that. And here's the reality. Like, they realized that this is the way the world was going. And so if they didn't do that, like, they were going to have to disperse and go be a part of other nations that were probably doing this, other peoples that were probably doing this. And so it was kind of I don't know when and who, what families were here and this and that, but it was popping up all over the place. Okay. And so this is what God says. Let's go to verse 5. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower. Notice how he doesn't say he came down on the tower or stood on the tower and spoke sin to these people, right? Like, he's coming from a different angle, saying, well, yeah, nice tower, I don't need that, which the children of man had built. And the Lord said, behold, they are one people, and they have all one language. And this is only the beginning of what they will do. And nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and there confuse their language, so that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord dispersed from there over the face of all the earth, and they left off. Wait, hold on. So the Lord dispersed them from there over the face of all the earth, and they left off building the city. Therefore, its name was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth. And from there, the Lord dispersed them over the face of all the earth. So what's here?
All the people are dispersed.
Okay.
And then also, like, Helen a little earlier, where it talks about in his time the earth was divided. I've heard people say, like, that was around the same time.
Yeah.
That's when Pangea was like, oh, languages, good, okay.
There you go. I don't know about Pangea, but
I have no idea. It's what I've heard.
that's good. You should believe everything you hear, as long as you read it also on Facebook, because that's where it's trustworthy. But yeah, and so obviously something happened. God stopped what they were doing, confused their language, and dispersed them. Right, and that actually that moment helps us understand the chapter we just read better. Right, because that's describing the fruit of all of that. Right, and so what else is here?
This is just kind of a loose wondering, but I wonder, is that part where he says this is only the beginning of what they will do?
Yeah.
So there's a part of me that wonders if God dispersed it then to keep it from becoming an extremely powerful superpower then.
Yeah. I mean, so obviously they were doing something wrong, right? And God saw that they were doing something wrong pretty well, right? Like they're talking and they're building and they have all these ideas of what's right and good, and they're making all of these plans. And if I don't do it now, there's no limit to what they can do. So what do you think that means? There's no limit to what they can do. Do you think, what was God afraid of?
It makes me think of when he drives them out of the garden, when he says they'll be like us, knowing good and evil.
Yeah.
Like that thought of creation, trying to make itself creator.
Yeah. Yeah. And there it's like, and they'll be like us and live forever in their torment, right? Like, that's one thing that's like, it was like, oh, why doesn't God want to live forever? It's like, because they've just sinned and they're going to live in that forever. So death in Christ, we've talked about through this, is a release from these bodies, right? Like into a new body, which he has promised those who trust him, right? But yeah, Sophie.
Just thinking about like how God had just sent the flood, and like the world had become so corrupt and mankind had all just gotten into so much sin. He sent the flood and he said, I'm not doing a flood again, so let's try something else. Let's disperse you.
I think that's right. Yeah. So like, he's like, okay, can't kill him. So I guess I'll just make him confused. And I think I think you're onto something, you know? And so, yeah, early on, let's just retrace that God has done this throughout all of Scripture, right? And it's funny because we constantly want to make God the bad guy in all of these scenarios, right? Started with Adam and Eve. Okay, they sinned, they misunderstood. So they knew what right worship was, right, at this time. Obeying God, keeping his garden, having kids, filling the earth, naming the bunnies, right? All fun, all great, right? But they decided to disobey intentionally God, right? And so God kicked them out of the garden. Okay, so then you got Seth, right? And Seth knew God, right? He came to God with an offering that the New Testament in Hebrews tells us was of faith, right? So Seth understood right worship. He understood that God was worthy of worship, that you should go to God and worship him. And Cain didn't, right? Cain hated Seth. He was jealous over Seth. He hated that God accepted the sacrifice of faith, right? And so God casted Cain out, right? And pushed him further away from him, okay? And so it was in the garden. We've already talked about this numerous times. Now it's further away. And now, like we get before the flood, and God, where's God now? He's in heaven looking down, right? And so, and what are people doing before the flood? Killing each other, right? Like it says it's violence that actually drove God to anger, right? This idea that people were okay with taking each other's lives. Lamech bragging about how many people he has killed and how if, Cain was cursed for 7 years, I should be cursed for 70 years, because blah, blah, blah. That's not right. Don't quote me on that, but you know what I mean? And so now God, like they were fighting with each other. Okay, so it was disobeying God intentionally, right? Murdering, and then now murdering more intentionally, and then Noah, right? And so now what's happening? So God is responding because God said, like, I have to wipe this out. It was getting to a point where people were just going to kill and oppress each other. He shortened lifespans in that time, like did a lot of different things so that people don't live on forever and continuing to oppress and kill and hurt. But now what's happening? What's Israel or not Israel? What are these people doing? They're not necessarily killing each other. We talked about that because God put some safe things in there. Like if someone kills someone, kill that person, right? Like we're not talking about as capital punishment, right or wrong necessarily. Here it was right. God said, I'm no longer going to wipe the world out. I'm not going to judge with killing, but you need to know it's not okay to kill each other. Right. So last week we talked about how God restrained the animals from people, right? People, like the animals feared us. God restrained people from people, and God protected us actually from himself. He said, I'll never do that to you again. Right. So he gave people peace. And so now societies were beginning to form on these rules and these laws, right? Like don't kill, don't steal, treat people how you kind of want to be treated. Right. Like, and so these societies now, what's being corrupted? Their hearts. Towards who? Yeah, their worship. Right? And so up until this point, people knew how to worship God. Seth knew how to worship God. Enoch knew how to worship God. It says he walked with God and he was no more. Noah walked with God. Right? So these generations understood genuine worship, and there was people who were worshiping God. But now we see that the worship had gotten so bad and so misguided that God decided, I have to fix this. I have to do something. I have to step in, because they think if they build a tower and put a bed there for me, that I'll come down and rest and eat and be thankful for that and then go back up to heaven and start doing, they're making their God like them. Right? Like if you read Romans chapter 1, where it's like they distorted and switched worship for this and they images of man and of animals and this and that. It's not that these people believe that like if I worship a rock, something good will happen, right? Like they believed that God was like them. And if they do good things to God, they'll get good things back, right? That sounds reasonable, right? Like that's kind of, I treat people like that. Like, hey, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Give me a discount at my store. When I come in, will you give me a free drink? Oh, yeah, you guys all have that sinful little relationship with somebody. Just kidding. But like the problem was these people had fundamentally misunderstood worship. They misunderstood how to relate with God. And like together as a nation, they were beginning to incorrectly approach him, right? They were making God like him. And a God with an appetite is a God who will oppress you, right? Like a God who needs something is a God who should be feared, right? And so these people were thinking about the needs of the gods, thinking about how they might worship and this and that, and doing it incorrectly. And God saw them and said, man, this is gonna ruin worship. This is gonna ruin knowing me. Because they all, I mean, like, there's nothing they're gonna do. There's nothing they can't do. They're gonna keep building, they're gonna keep thinking they're doing the right thing, and they're never gonna know me. They're never gonna have peace. Right? They're never going to have a right relationship with me, because if they think I need anything from them, they're missing it. Right? If they think anything on this world could satisfy me, they're missing it. Like we talked about. And so God's halting false worship. And I think that is the sin of Babel. People were worshiping God incorrectly. We just got, in this desert, we just got the 10 Commandments, right? Do you guys know the first one? Anyone? Bible trivia? Yeah, what's the second one? Yeah, so the first 5 are about worshiping God, right? And the second 5 are about relationship. Basically, that's simplifying them too much. But God had just given Israel clarity that have no other gods. And that doesn't mean before me, like I need to be the top God. He's saying, in my presence, around you or around me, there should be no other gods, no idols. Right? Like God just flies. So Israel just heard that. And then they hear this babble and they're saying, oh, that's what was going on there. They were worshiping God incorrectly, and it was keeping them from knowing him, right? And so God, from the very beginning, he's halting false worship, but I do think he's preparing the nations for Jesus, right? In the same bit, right? Because now all the language is confused, and God's like, you're not doing it right, okay? You're not doing it right. So I'm going to confuse your language, and then I'm going to bring my son, and then I'm going to command my followers to go find you and share the gospel with you. Have hope. Right? Like what you've ruined again. Okay. So from the very beginning, perfect garden, we ruined it. Right? Like second chances, kind of out in the, not in the garden, but still close to God, we ruined it. Right? The world is growing, societies are growing, and we're hating each other. We ruin it. God gives us a new, fresh earth, right? And Noah was a worshiper of God. Noah walked with God. Okay. And his sons and his daughters have families, and they grow, and they ruin it again. Right? Like it's a commentary, not on a mean God. Be like, if you think God's barbaric, and the Old Testament God is like, no, it's a loving God. Like, why would God confuse their languages and send them off? Because if they settled in that terrible worship, they would never know him. Right? And God knows that this Israel that's now hearing these stories being told is the answer to that problem. Right? Like he is about to call Abraham out of a pagan nation that worships similarly. Right? And he is about to then bring about Israel. And it's not that Israel was better. God was just setting them apart, just like he's doing here. Right? Like no one worships me right. So I'm going to set apart a nation and teach them how to worship me right. And what do? They ruin it. Right? It's like the Old Testament is just, you should just be like, oh, this again? Oh, this again? Oh, this again? It just happens over and over again. Israel, again, with their temple, with their law, with their ideas, with their hatred of the nations instead of their love of the nations, right? Abraham would be a blessing. We're going to learn that next week, so that everybody might know God, all the families of the earth, right? And so Israel, again, had come to this place like, oh, not you, us. We're God's chosen people. And so out of Israel, the cornerstone is going to come, and Israel is going to trip and fall and die and be judged on that cornerstone. But to those who believed are going to be saved. God, again, is being kind. He's spreading these people out saying, get away from this worship. Don't all of you give your hearts to this false worship. Don't believe that you can come up to me or that I might come down to you if you just give me enough treats. Stop acting like you know me. Here's the thing. If you think you know God, if you're comfortable with him, it's not okay. We don't know him. Right? Like they didn't know him and they wanted to make him more knowable. I get hungry on travel. If I'm traveling and someone blesses me, I'm going to remember that. If they're ever in my neck of the woods, man, I'm going to take them out. I'm going to take them to the tram. Right? Like I'll pay them back totally. Like we do that. When we travel, we give our numbers out to like friends we make who took us into their homes. If you ever traveled overseas and if that friend ever comes, would you not take them to all the awesome places of your city? You absolutely would. Right? And so these people were trying to make God like them. Manageable, knowable, understandable. And if we can control God, man, life would be so great. And we do that today. Like, how do we do that today? We're not building weird temples, right? We're not buying a stairway to heaven in Zeppelin fans. Okay, anyway, we're not gathering in these urbanized granary temple places. But how do we try to make God like us? Transactional. Yeah. And then like, man, I messed up. So if I'll do this for you, God. I'll give you my heart, whatever that means. I'm not going to be a missionary, but I'll pretend I will to all my friends. And like later, can I have a husband? Can I have a wife? Yeah, God, I'll go to the BSU, but can I have a good job? Right? Like we start to transact with God. And then the other side of that is I sinned again. God must hate me. I would hate me. Right? Like we try to make him like us because that's comfortable. Right? Like that's why every world religion is based on what you do. If you think about it. Right? Even humanism, even atheism, right? Like they're great philanthropists. They're like, I'm going to be the best human. Nothing happens after this, but I'm going to make sure other people's lives and mine are better, right? Islam, 5 pillars, Buddhism, Zen, right? Hinduism, worshiping the right gods and putting the right things in the right place so those gods might bless you. So like reincarnation and all, the whole goal is like, what can I do to just turn the odds in my favor, right? That's how we know they're man-made. Because doesn't that sound like a great idea? Some of you are in here like, man, I wish that was true. False. Because here's, at the end of that road, it's not enough. And God knew that even then. Like these attempts, this desire of these people to know me, man, because they don't know me, that's why they're doing this. And it's not enough. Right? This is not going to save them. And so by his grace, I believe he confused them and spread them out and like began to, in history, weave about this crazy story that makes no sense to us. And that should be a good indication that it's true. Right? Like, I mean, it's why I've said this numerous times. It's why we like the movies like Iron Man or Lord of the Rings, or I mean, like, it's like a little Hobbit. It's unassuming, like no one, if you lined them up and Tolkien was like, what do you think I'm going to use as the hero of my story? Like, we're like, I don't know. The Hobbit, oh, that's awesome, right? Like, it's like this little weird thing, right? Like, but he's the hero. It's unexpected. It's the sweet twist. And that is the gospel, right? And that, I mean, like the God, he says he lives in temples. He doesn't live in temples made by hands. He gives to all of us life and breath and everything. And he has given us his word that we might know him more fully. And that's what he's doing here to these people. By confusing them, he is making them understand him more. You're missing it. You don't get it. You're sinning. Your worship is so far from true and right and good. Your desire is so selfish, right? You want to invite me to a little bed and give me some fruit so that I'll then bless you. Like, do you not know that I give you life and breath and everything? I kept you. I love you. I care for you. I created you, right? And they didn't know, but I'm going to send my son to die for you. And so these people that were scattered, I just love the picture. Like, they're these scattered nations of all these people. And it's just like, oh, that's sad. Like, oh no, that's confusing. And then in the end, like today, one of the things that you ought to know about God's word is that he intends that people from every tribe, tongue, and language would worship him. rightly. There's the key, right? Not through Hinduism or Buddhism. I get it. I know. I want God to be like me. I want it to make sense that all religions lead to the same place. I mean, on my normal, I guess you'd say, logical thinking days, like, man, that just seems so right. And that's why everyone's so confused. Look at society. Look at the everything is okay society. Like, as long as it doesn't bother anybody, it's so messed up. Like, they're trying so hard to piece it together. It's Babel all over again, right? Like, they're trying to define what's right and what's good, and it's okay for you, if it's okay for me, and this and that, but it's just imploding day in, day out. It doesn't make sense. It's never going to work because it's wrong. I know, I'm not supposed to say that. I know it makes you guys like, oh, can you say people are wrong? Yeah, God says people are wrong. He said that here. You're wrong. And I don't want you to continue to grow and build higher towers in larger cities that are wrong. There is a right way to worship me. Adam and Eve knew it. Right? Seth knew it. Seth, am I getting that right? Cain and Abel knew it. Sorry, there's a lot of names. Abel knew it. Enoch knew it. Noah knew it. Right? Abraham's going to know it. I'm going to speak to him. Israel's going to know about it and know it, and some of them will understand it. Right? Then Jesus is coming. I'm going to build a new temple of people who are going to know it, and they are going to have right understanding, and I'm going to tell them to tell the whole world, not withholding from anybody. Right? This is Babel's sin. God could have easily judged them again and just left us, and he didn't. He said, that's wrong. Let me show you what's right. Here's how, just a couple lessons. Like, how do we know what's right then? What should we be doing? How do you read the Bible? Is it a Christian horoscope? Right? Like, oh, what do you have for me today, God? I'm kind of sad. Can you fix me? Like, I went to Safeway, bought my horoscope. I didn't like the answer there, so maybe I'll come here. Maybe you can give me something today. Right? Like, I'll go to church tomorrow. If you just help me, I promise I'll be a good Christian. Just give me something, God. Like, show me what I should be doing. The Bible is about God. It's not about you. Right? And what you should be doing is worshiping him because he's worthy. Because he loves you. And so, like, reading his word should not just give us quick fixes for our lives. That's not what he intends. And that's why you're frustrated in your walk with God. That's why you're confused. Because he doesn't do what you want him to do. And that frustrates you. Build a tower. Put a bed at the top of it. Maybe that'll help. You've done it. Right? Some of you being here tonight might be your tower. Right? Some of you going to church on Sunday might be your tower. The boy or the girl you are dating or you're not dating might be your tower. Right? Just trying somehow to worship him correctly. It's confusing, and God is never going to bring clarity in that place. Right? Like, he didn't come to the top of the tower and go, hey, this isn't right. Good try. I'm glad you built it because it shows that you have good hearts. I just a few little minor adjustments. No, he ruined their whole lives. He confused them and sent them off in crazy directions. They couldn't speak to each other. They couldn't continue building. They couldn't continue their worship. He ruined it. And some of you are in the midst of your lives being ruined. And here's the crazy thing. You're yelling at God. He's the bad guy again. That's what happens over and over again in these things that we've been studying about sin. It's easy to just be like, why did God kick him out of the garden? That's just too far. Why didn't God accept Cain's offering? Why is he being such a jerk? Right? Like, why did God wipe out the whole earth? I mean, like, that's just messed up. Why did God confuse them here? Why won't God give me what I want? He has. The reason why is because he's given you Jesus. Every human soul longs for Christ. And we go off in so many places to try to find that joy and satisfaction in other things. And God has withheld Jesus from nobody, and he never will. Okay, and so I wasn't intending this, but guys, would you go overseas next year? There's confused things happening all around the world. There's confusing things happening, and that's what ministry team is so important. Here at UNM, we want to speak truth into the confusion, not because we think we're better than people, because we're just like them. Right? Like, I struggle with all this today. But by God's grace, I have the Spirit and I have knowledge of the gospel, and I've received that, and that is my reality. So it grounds me. It takes me off of that stupid tower, and it puts me on the cornerstone, Jesus Christ. We need you to make that true, right? And these confused languages, these nations, these people that never get to hear the gospel, right? Like, God's such a jerk. Why would he send them to hell? Because there is a right and a wrong. There is truth, and that one truth is Jesus Christ. Here's the thing, believer, I hope that makes you mad. Hope that makes you sad that God is being robbed of the worship that he deserves, that people are still getting it wrong today, and that in Christ you have the hope to bring that good news to people who don't have it, whether it's your coworker, your brother, or a friend on the other side of the world. God has not left us. He is not the bad guy. Okay, so that's the third scene. Okay, the first scene, murder, like sin is in us. It's rapid, it moves quickly. It took one brother, the very first brothers from Adam and Eve to just kill each other, right? Like, and then sin is, what was my second? Rapid. The results of sin is death and killing and hatred, right? Like, it just happened instantly, right? And judgment, and then the resiliency of sin is what we've been talking about these last couple of times. Noah, it stayed a little bit in Noah and in his sons, and it grew to the point where they did not know how to worship God, did not know how to love him. These three sins, you should just be like, that is so me apart from Christ. I can so see myself doing all of those things, hating and murdering, right? Like, just being a part of a society that just take from the poor and care less about anybody else. Right? That's so me, apart from Christ. Worshiping God incorrectly, that's so me, apart from Christ. Right? And that's the power of the gospel, because you're not apart from Christ. If you have him, you have him. And he's freed you from this nonsense, this futility, this sin. Right? And so next week is where we're going to end, and it's with the hope. Right, so this is a story, right? Like, and we know that this boat's going somewhere, and the rest of Genesis, I encourage you to read it. It's crazy because we span the creation of the world to now the creation of all the languages in 11 chapters. That's pretty quick. And then the next majority, I think 30 or so chapters of Genesis is going to be about this one family, right? Because God is doing something. And if you're here and you don't know Jesus, that is what he's doing, right? He's bringing about, just like Matt said, who's the descendant of Shem? Jesus. Okay, great. Yeah. That's true, right? And we see glimpses of that. It's not a confusing book. If you read the Old Testament with this understanding that the writers are doing something, that the Spirit is creating a story that's going to end in the cross, man, the word just becomes so relevant and meaningful. Like, these three crazy stories, we normally just drift by, oh, Noah's Ark, that's baby stuff, and then Babel, yeah, that's weird, language stuff. And Cain and Abel, that's murder stuff. That's weird. That's bad. You know what I mean? No, this is you stuff. This is human stuff, right? It doesn't get better. Each new creation, each time we think this might be the one, it doesn't get better until the one comes. He's for every tribe, tongue, and nation. And God will have worshipers from everywhere. We know that. We know that from the rest of the scriptures. And so anyway, I hope this has encouraged you. Not encouraged you man, I just love my sin. I'm just so glad I'm a sinner, but just in the sense of having this knowledge and this wisdom about myself helps me worship rightly. I want to be a person who worships rightly. I don't want to make God like me. I don't want to use God as kind of like a heavenly vending machine, right? Aren't you tired of pushing A6 and it's like when it falls and gets stuck in the next one? And you're like sitting there shaking it in your mouth, like, what's going on? God's not a heavenly vending machine. He owes you nothing, but he's given you everything. Right? He owed these people nothing. He could have let them just build their towers and rot in hell. Instead, he began a new work by confusing them, dispersing their false worship, and bringing about Abraham, right? Israel, Jesus, you. Trust him. He's worthy of your praise. Okay, so that's it. That's it. We're out of sin land. So let's give that a round of applause. Thanks for sticking with it. That's been a long time. We've been talking about sin for a long time. And so next week, we're going to talk about God's promise and his new work in Israel and Abraham and all that. That will be our last week. Normally we have a huge party and a barbecue or whatever, not doing any of that. Go cook a hot dog in your backyard. I don't know. Any other announcements that we need to make? If you just graduated and are confused about LTC, come talk to Megan in the office after this. Okay. So if you're, thank you, Gail. If you haven't RSVP'd to LTC, RSVP. We want to know how many chairs we need to have out, how many snacks we need to buy, how many gift cards for the winner of the scavenger hunt. Is this a scavenger hunt? It's not a scavenger hunt. It's like a clue. Yeah.
There will be an epic trophy that will be displayed year round, so.
Yeah, we're starting a new tradition. It's a COVID tradition. We're going to enjoy it. Your name will be forever on something. And so, that's all happening tomorrow night at 6:30. Again, if you don't know about it, if you're like, this is the first time I heard about it, just come tomorrow. It'll give you a lot of information, a lot of chance, a fun hang, which is everyone needs a little bit. It'll be outside, so hopefully it'll be COVID friendly and all that. Saturday is kind of when we're really going to get down to it. And so if you can't come to either of those and you wish you could, talk to a staff member. Like, we're flexible. We understand this year is a mess. And so we're going to try to make the best of the mess and trust the Lord to do some good stuff. And so what we're going to do again tonight, if you haven't signed the plaques, and if you're like, what plaques? That's weird. We honor every senior that graduates out of this place with an alumni mug, a weird plate, and a plaque that has a verse in it, and we just all kind of say, love you, care about you. And so if you haven't done that socially distancingly, responsibly, go ahead and do that after this and fill it up. If you don't know the person, just congrats, thumbs up, way to be, emoji, drawing. Just do it, right? And make people feel loved. If you know about them, write a nice note. We want to send off our seniors, though, differently this year. We want to send them off well. And so do that well. Other than that, I'm going to release this front row, Halo included. I know you have to leave. Hopefully you all have your plans off of campus. It keeps happening. Get out of my building. You guys all think you're above the law and above this. Get out of my parking lot and then go do whatever you're going to do. All right, but not here. Be safe. Love you, care about you. So, Will, are you guys going to leave together this little hook? Okay, so you guys can head out this first row. Love you. Straight. Yes, got that email. You're going to go? Okay, great. Go ahead. Go ahead. You're going to go fill out too, Alex? Go for it. Go for it. I'm going to end this live stream. I always forget to do that. Bye, guys. Love you guys.
Bye.